Alright, so kind of want to talk about dice. I don't know if dice is necessarily a subject people want to talk about. It's that interesting. There's been a couple people, I think very few, that made YouTube videos of all the dice that they have for their role-playing games, and card games, and war games. So let's actually start with these, because most people buy a lot of dice or collect dice. I don't know if collecting is really the word, just acquire, accumulate dice. People accumulate dice mostly for role-playing activities, right? And obviously you have board games, but those dice usually stay in those boxes. They're not really collected into a bag. Maybe someone does that, let me know. But these particular dice, the 3066 from Chessex, and I'm sure other companies do as well, but they have this wonderful little plastic holder that perfectly fits them all. And these are perfect for both collectible card games, specifically Magic. I don't know about other collectible card games, but specifically Magic and Warhammer and other war games. So specifically, they're better for that for Warhammer, because you need to roll a lot of dice in Warhammer, right? And it's very satisfying to roll a lot of dice. And you could, I don't know if you ever get up to rolling 36 at a time, but it comes close, and you have some set aside as this is, this many hits, and then I got to re-roll these ones and that kind of stuff, right? So that's mostly the use case for this, but I use them for Magic the Gathering. So basically, and I usually use two colors. This, basically, the pip on the dice denotes, let's say, how many counters something has, whether that's +1/+1 counters, whether that's suspend counters, or any other number of counters, right? So whatever's on the face of the card is on the face of the card, in addition to however many counters are on it. And then with this color, I would use it to denote how many cards of that type there are. So, like, let's say you're making 6 flying 1/1 flying fairy tokens. Well, you could put out 6 of those tokens, like as in the cards that you can, if you could find 6 of them. If you have, what happens if you have 20 of them or 40 of them? Are you going to buy that many tokens? Because you're not going to open that many tokens out of a pack. Anyway, so this color denotes, in this case, what those 6 fairy tokens, and you put it on top of 1 fairy token card, right? So that's the general use for Magic the Gathering, and I really like that use. Now, why do I have multiple of this color? And I also have multiple of this color. I just don't have them out right now. It's because I went to Gen Con and bought a lot of dice that were from the Chessex booth and color coordinated them. And I'll show you. Specifically, this color is color coordinated. The green is as well, but that's not them. This is just my general bag of dice. So it must be in this Gen Con. Oh, that's the Gary. That's why that was the Gary Con bag. These are the dice that I bought at Gary Con. Anyway, there we go. Oh, and it's not all of them. There's other stuff mixed in here. So you can see I got these oversized ones, right? And then, well, I guess these are the oversized ones. These are the way oversized ones. Also, so dice. Huh. I'm actually missing. Yeah, I'm missing the other bag that would have my... So basically what I had was, see this color? It doesn't actually match that one. These ones matched these 3066, but I also had like a D20, a D12, a D8, a D4, right? But I had multiples of them so that I had lots of, you know, polyhedral dice that matched these 36 D6 and these D6 and stuff like that, so that I, you know, if I had a character who was mostly fire-based in a role-playing game, then I would use these dice. And if I had a, you know, like an earth-based, I'd use these ones, right? That was kind of the thing. And I don't know why those dice disappeared. So I must be keeping them in some separate bag that I completely forgot about. Yeah. But these are, let's see. Make sure special. I guess I can't really talk that much about that one. So we'll put these back in the bag because these are the less interesting dice. I mean, there's some metal dice in here, and I discovered I'm not that into metal dice, I guess. I thought so when metal dice first came out. I think it was like early, probably, you know, the 2000s or maybe even earlier. But when, you know, people started selling them everywhere, and I saw them a lot, I was interested in them. And then I got a set at Gen Con, and I guess it depends on the metal, right? And I'll show you even more. So these are actually, wormwood dice thrown in here, which I guess I'll get to next, is the wormwood dice. But yeah, I bought sets of wormwood dice from their Kickstarters, and this is another set of them, right? But those are just regular plastic, or what's the word? Resin. Well, no, no, they're not resin. They're just regular plastic dice. It's always hard to get all the dice in, and these oversized D4s are great because they're much easier to pick up than, say, a little D4, right? Your hand always slides along the edge of the D4 trying to get it up. I got D3 as I don't really actually I don't think I've had yet a use case for a D3. Anyway, so let's get to the wormwood dice. Let's see. We'll start with are these them? Actually, yeah, these are interesting. So Wormwood had a I don't know what number of dice the campaign was, whether it was first, second, or third, but basically what they had was these were the extras that were thrown in, and they were this thing that the owner of the company, Doug, came up with, high velocity dice. Yeah, that's what they call it, high velocity dice. I mean, you can see there's a 20 here, and there's a 20 there, and there's a 1 there, and there should be another 1 and a 2. See, so they got multiple 1s, multiple 2s, multiple 20s, multiple 19s. So yeah, there's the multiple 1s, right? So it has basically the same average rolling number, but it's skewed more to the extremes, meaning that you're more likely to roll low or more likely to roll high on this. And so I really like that idea. I don't know how many people did, because they didn't continue that on any further dice Kickstarters that they did. But yeah, the high velocity dice are useful in, you know, someone has their character do something extreme, right? Something really cool, really fun, and then you give them a high velocity die and they roll it, and they are either way more likely to succeed or way more likely to fail than the usual. So I just thought that was really cool. So we'll put that aside, and then the original dice that I bought with that campaign is these, yes. These gemstone dice. So these are manufactured from gemstones, I guess. I don't know if they've ground down to dust and then reconstituted. I'm not exactly sure how this works. I don't think that they're sort of carved into this shape. That makes little sense to have a machine that does that. It makes far more sense to grind them down into dust and then I guess, use some sort of something, essentially a glue, to basically turn them like with particle board, except that instead it's particles of gemstones, and then reconstitute them, and then put them in in a mold, and then they come out this shape, and then you paint the numbers on them, right? And this was the first, I guess, fancy set of dice that I bought, and they were quite expensive. And so nowadays, and I think there was a period where you actually had multiple, where you had sets that you would buy, and the sets would have at least 4d6, because you kind of need 4d6, right? Specifically for Dungeons and Dragons and character creation, right? But I think a lot of other, role-playing games probably use a similar character creation method. And the 4d6, dropping the lowest die, I used to say distracting the lowest die all the time. My friend Chris would make fun of me for it. Anyway, and then having 2d20. Nowadays, it wasn't very common before 5e. But now you have, you either have an extra d20, or you have an extra d20 and you're taking the highest, or you're taking the lowest, whatever. And then you only really need one of each of these, and then two of the d10s to do percentiles, right? So this is what I consider the best, for a set of dice. Having this number of dice, that makes a set to me. The set of 7, which is really just one of each of these dice, doesn't cut it. And I just don't think that. I think that dice manufacturers need to make bigger sets. Of course, you can find more of the dice in the same thing, but stores aren't really buying the dice that way, right? These are the extra d6s you want, or whatever. Oh, shoot. There's an alarm again. I didn't turn that off. Sorry if I, traumatized you by having an alarm that made you think, oh no, I've slept past my alarm? I don't know. Anyway. So now the next set of wormwood dice that I bought are these. These are the Dice by Dispel. Again, the larger set. This one has, I think this is a freebie. Must be a freebie that they threw in with the Kickstarter. But yeah. So again, I have the same thing going on. And I wish I did have the other bag that had all the other dice, so I went even further, going back to this with these this colored dice. Instead of having 2d20, I'd have 3d20. I'd still have the 4d6. I don't really need, because I got a lot of these, right? And then 2d12, 2d8, like 4, 5 d10s, and 6 d4s. And I got that stuff at the Chessex booth at Gen Con, because they had just a huge number of dice to pick through. And then so I found the ones that had the most of all the different types of dice, and then I just bought them all. Oops. And knocked the camera. I just bought the ones that that matched, and built up an even larger set. And I had those, but those must be at the store in the back or whatever. Anyway, so anyway, these are the Dice by Dispel, and they're very, very nice. They're not as fancy as those gemstone ones, or as costly, but they're pretty nice. And I got one for my nephews as well. And in this campaign, they weren't doing the. Maybe you could buy the high velocity dice if you asked, but they weren't specifically part of the campaign. So, all right. So then, this is the pile of dice, and this is what I bought at GaryCon, just so I'd have less dice to play different role-playing games with, and they're just your basic dice, right? That you would find anywhere, and they're all part of a set. So they're, there's all these green ones are all in there. There's like D12, D20, and stuff like that. Same with the red. So there's probably 4 to 5 sets, full sets in here, but these sets were all ones with the extra D6s, but not necessarily the extra D12s or D8s or D20s even. They did have 2 D20s in them, so people were selling them at GaryCon as sets like that, right? And then in here, these are like special dice that you get from tournaments. This was a HeroClix one. I don't have that many. In fact, that might be the only one that I have like that. So I don't really have any special dice that you could only get in certain places. And these are just a big pile of dice that if, you know, someone comes and they didn't actually bring dice, they can just grab themselves a set of dice out of here. So this is what a lot of individuals have with their dice, is that they've collected a bunch of different, accumulated a bunch of different sets of dice, and they just throw them in a bag. And then I guess there's one set that they like the most. And these dice roll the worst for whatever reason. I don't like the speckled stuff. I think it off balances them. Let me know if you think the same. Somewhere in here I thought also were my original. I had some OD&D dice from back in the day, but I'm not seeing them, so maybe they're in a separate bag as well. But anyway, so this is what people have, is just a big pile of dice, and then they might have one, I guess, fancy set of dice that they like to use. These are the ones that they, I guess, share with others, or that would be on the table to count things. Yeah, so, you know, I'm sure that anyone watching this at this point is, you know, is like me and has this giant pile of dice that other people have, and you just accumulate them over the years. Now, these actually were only accumulated in the last 10 years, right? Because, as I mentioned in many videos, I stopped playing games at the end of the 90s. Now, it's not that I throw out the dice, it's that I don't know what happened to them, basically. So some of them, we were renovating the basement, found them in the walls as the walls were removed, right? It was only like 2, maybe 3 dice. But from the 80s, from the late 80s, the dice that I had, and that's where I found one of the original OD&D, like D4s, or was it a D8? I can't remember. And then some other ones that I bought from Dice Tubes in the 80s, but not the full set. So I don't really have any full sets that I had when I was a kid. Most of those dice that I had when I was a kid, and I didn't really have that many back then. Obviously, I was a teenager with very little money. So, yeah, I just didn't have that many dice. So whatever ones I did have kind of disappeared, and then I rebought my dice over time when I got back into gaming. And I didn't really get back into role-playing, so I didn't have a need for a lot of dice, because if you just play board games, the dice come in the board games. So it wasn't until basically probably around the time 5e came out, that I started rebuying dice for Dungeons & Dragons. Now, actually, I guess I can show these. These were also bought at Gen Con, I believe. Yeah, so they're just all blank polyhedrals. I was going to use them for various things. In my head, I'm always kind of designing my own games, and so I was going to use them for possibly that. And, you know, I can also designing mechanics in the games that I do play. Not necessarily board games, but in role-playing games, designing new ways of using the dice. And so, like, someone has already done something like that. Like, this is like, you know, specific hit locations. Interesting, right? Or this is, I guess, for you to randomly generate some kind of trap in a dungeon. If you don't want to decide for yourself, just say it's a lightning trap if you roll that. So they sold blank polyhedrals at Gen Con. They actually sold at the Gen Con. It was in 2019. There was several booths there from people who basically sell game components, right? Because a lot of people had started making their own games, because being able to buy game components was getting cheaper. And nowadays there's a site that's It's a crowdfunding site that lets you also basically build the game. It provides you with the means to manufacture the game as well as crowdfund, if I'm getting that right. Anyway, now dice bags are something that people are also into, and I like, when I go to convention, I like getting the dice bag for that convention. That's a good thing. And then some Kickstarters come with dice bags. Now I guess the classic dice bag is the Canadian Royal Crown dice bag from the was it whiskey or scotch you can get. This purple bag that says Royal Crown. It's a cheap brand of whiskey that you can get from Canada. But it was perfect for carrying your dice around. That's what most people have. But anyway, I just thought I'd talk about dice and the accumulation of dice, and talk about what people have and what people want in dice, and the different dice that I have. So these ones, the ones that I share, I found that there's certain colors rolled better than others. But then again, you never know. It could just be, they're random. So who really knows? I really wish I knew where those other dice were that were part of this whole accumulation phase at Gen Con. But anyway, these are the dice, and let me know what you have for your dice accumulation / collection. Is there someone collecting dice? Is there someone grading dice? Let me know if there's someone grading dice. Anyway, have a good day.